Hi, I'm Lindsay Bennett, Healthcare Finance Executive, and in today's video, I'm going to tell you about 5 hospital metrics that you need to know if you're a clinical leader or a revenue cycle leader or a healthcare finance professional. Today, I'm going to tell you about patient days, average daily census, average length of stay, adjusted discharges, and the case mix index. Patient days are simply the total number of days of care that are provided to inpatients. And they're important to know because you often express revenue and expenses in relation to patient days. So revenue per patient day, expenses per patient day, salaries and benefits per patient day, drug costs per patient day, medical supplies per patient day. And that gives you a way to compare actual and budget or to compare against industry benchmarks.
This is just a simple example of how patient days are calculated. So we have 3 patients in this example, and we have their admission date and their discharge date. The way that we count patient days, we count whether there's a head in a bed at midnight. So in the example of patient 3 down here, they're admitted on July the 3rd. So they're in the bed at midnight on that day. That day counts. So we have the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th. That's 6 patient days because they're discharged on the 9th. So that day is not going to count as a patient day because they're not in the bed at midnight. So our patient days for this one patient, patient number 3, are 6. Patient number 1 had 4 days. Patient number 2 had 9 days. Patient number 6 had 6 days. So if these were our only patients, we would just sum up these patient days here. That would give us 19 patient days.
We can calculate the average daily census for a period of time. So for example, if we want to calculate the average daily census for a year, what we need to do is take the total patient days for that period of a year and divide it by 365 days in the year. Another example would be if we had 9,300 patient days in a month with 31 days in that month. We would divide 9,300 divided by 31 days to get an average daily census of 300 patients. The average daily census is important because it's used often to allocate resources. For example, staffing models are often based on average daily census. So we might staff a certain number of RNs or LPNs or technicians to a medical or surgical floor in a hospital based on its average daily census. The average length of stay tells you how long on average your inpatients are in the hospital. And the way that we calculate average length of stay is to take the patient days divided by the discharges for a period of time. So we could calculate this for the year, we could calculate it for a month, or we could even calculate it for a week. Now, average length of stay matters in the hospital world because hospitals are paid by DRG, or diagnosis-related group. That means that the hospital gets a fixed payment for each discharge, which means that if you have a longer length of stay, you're going to incur more costs because every additional day of stay has nursing labor costs associated with it. It has supply costs, lab tests, etc. So a lower length of stay tends to be more desirable because you're more efficient, you're getting your patients discharged sooner, which is limiting your cost and preserving your profit margin from that payment that you're getting for that patient's stay. Now, if your average length of stay is too short, that can be an indicator of quality problems, which you would likely see reflected in other measures such as avoidable readmissions. We often look at our average length of stay versus benchmarks, and if our length of stay is longer, then we have an opportunity to be more efficient and put certain process improvements in place to reduce that average length of stay and then all the costs that are associated with it. So typically, if you can reduce your average length of stay, even by a fraction of a day, it's going to increase your profit margin if you're a hospital. Adjusted discharges. We all know what a hospital discharge is. It's when you send the patient home. But what's an adjusted discharge? An adjusted discharge is we are taking our inpatient discharges and we are applying an adjustment factor to adjust for outpatient business. Now, this is really important in the hospital world because the trends that we're seeing over the last several years are a shift from inpatient to outpatient settings. So outpatient care can be a big portion of a hospital's business. So what we're doing is we're reflecting that by adjusting our inpatient discharges. The way that we do that is we take our inpatient discharges and we multiply them by an adjustment factor. That adjustment factor is your total gross revenue divided by your total inpatient revenue. And then our final hospital metric is the CMI, or Case Mix Index. A case mix index is essentially a complexity score. So if you think about your national baseline as being 1.0, then the CMI that's higher than 1.0 means that your patients are more complex or generally sicker. If your case mix index is below 1.0, then you're probably doing more routine care and your patients aren't as sick as the average. So the way that we get our case mix index is if we sum up all of our DRG weights and we divide that by the discharges. So for example, let's say that I pick my patient population for a period of time and I sum up all the weights on all the DRGs of the patients that I see during that time. Let's say that the total for that is 450. Now let's say that I had 300 discharges for that same time period. 450 divided by 300 gives me a CMI of 1.5. So does that mean that my patients are generally more complex or less complex versus the national baseline? Well, if the CMI is higher, then they're more complex. And what that means is that they're going to be more resource intensive. I'm probably going to have more expenses associated with their care. And also those DRG payments take into account the case mix weight. So my DRG payments are going to typically be higher.
What you're looking at right here is a list of DRGs. This is just a snapshot of some of them. There are a lot more than this, but you'll notice in the column that I have highlighted here, we have weights, and these are the weights that are used to calculate the case mix index. So if we look at these weights, if I look down here towards the bottom, about the fourth one up from the bottom, this spinal fusion, except cervical with spinal curvature, malignancy, infection, and so on, has a case weight of 8.4. So that is a much higher complexity than something like this one here, which is disorders of the pancreas, except malignancy and without complications. So this one has a 0.62 weight, which is much less complex. So you can see how these work for each of the diagnosis-related groups.
I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like the formulas and a quick cheat sheet for everything that I covered today, you can go to the description and you'll find a sign up for my email list where I give you free tools, templates, and training. Thank you again. Please like and subscribe so that you get a notification on my next video. Have a great day.